Yeah, well, I'm a Christian. I think it's hard for me if I'm just looking at evolution, just to kind of justify um, how you would get the immaterial from a purely materialistic worldview. Like, I mean, how do we evolve? Like, I'm just trouble. I was talking to a guy last night. He's pretty well educated and a biologist, I think, and he was trying to talk about how we evolved to get the immaterial, like how our cells, if we really are nothing but a collection of cells, how can we, as a collection of cells, be aware of ourselves? It's almost like the problem of consciousness that I think is a hard.
Well, it is the hard problem of consciousness. Was the guy you were talking to Science with Simon?
You know what? I think it might have been.
Yeah,
I think
he's
he was.
he's he's a he's a good friend of mine. He's actually he's in here right now. Hey
Oh
Simon.
yeah, yeah. He's a
So
smart guy.
I mean, you're talking about the hard problem of consciousness. Now, I don't know what the only thing I know about consciousness is I'm pretty sure I have it. And I'm almost certain that it comes from our brains, right? And I don't know how it happens, but I don't think it's really controversial to say that maybe there can be different kinds of consciousness, but we have it because we have brains, right? That is where the mind comes from.
Hmm.
So everything we know about how that works is it's a bottom up process, right? If like I don't think most people would say an individual cell is conscious, not really, or it definitely can't think, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same with one neuron in your brain can't think. Neither can 10 of them. Can a million of them? Maybe. I'm not really sure. But
Yeah, that's where I'm confused.
100 billion of them can. It's like an emergent property, basically. And it's complicated. So again, without knowing what consciousness is, I think we have a good scientific description of where it comes from, in a way.
Yeah, and what Simon and I agreed on last night is the fact that in science and in religion, we need, or at least what we're trying to produce here, is to give us the greatest amount of certainty in a worldview, so that we can be and have the most predictive power on any given set of circumstances. And we were talking about like justifying our presuppositions of how do we even come about truth in itself. Like, and I think that as a scientist or someone who is looking for the ability to predict things on a consistent basis, um, I think it would be beneficial, or at least seems to be the most rational decision, to say that there's objective truth out there. Do you believe in objective truth?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there are facts, like the universe exists. I think that's an objective truth. It doesn't matter if I exist or not, the universe will, right?
Yeah. Okay. So that I think we agree there that there's objective truth. Um, that I mean, I guess a side discussion of objective truth would be objective morality.
Right. That I'm there are some philosophers that think that are like atheists that think that moral facts are real. I was actually just rereading an old book that I read a few years ago called Enlightenment Now, and he talks about that. I don't have a very good.
Yeah.
It's not my
Like mind
wheelhouse or
independent
whatever.
facts. I've talked to J Mike about like what he believes is mind
Oh, cool.
independent facts.
Yeah, so for me, the way I've always thought about it, and I don't think about it too deeply because I have other things to do. But for me, like humans are social creatures that like by our nature we have to cooperate because that's the only way that we can actually survive in perpetuity. So like if we say that the objective is to not go extinct, then then the way we act should reinforce that. And if typical normal, like we can diagnose psychopathy, which means
Hmm.
somebody goes against what our literal nature is. So this is where it's being grounded in something that's real. I wouldn't. So like moral just means not
Yeah, but
exactly right and
don't you see
wrong,
that?
just what we should or should not do,
Yeah.
right? So so I think it can be grounded in that, and then I think we can use logic. Like there's no logical case you can possibly make that says it's not okay for you to harm me, but it's okay for me to harm you, right?
Well,
That's
one
just not
important thing that
possible.
you said that I think we can't just glide over, but have a discussion about is like for instance, you kind of postulated that the objective of life is to exist, and that's a presupposition that some people would disagree with. People that harm themselves, or just like it says who that we're supposed to continue existing. And obviously, I'm not a proponent of just offing people, but that's just a presupposition that we're just throwing in there. That's pretty important to talk about. Because if you don't agree on that, then you're not going to agree on any of the morality that entails from it.
Yeah, but I mean that is a presupposition that I hold.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the more important discussion is to be able to justify our presuppositions, and just even like truth. I just think in the like if I was taking the Christian worldview, which I'm a Christian, um, it seems to me that a governing that God is the governing principle by which we are able to amalgamize all of the reason and laws of logic and structure of our life in a very coherent way that gives us rationality, as opposed to an immaterial or a materialistic worldview that in my mind I have a hard time bridging the reality that, or the hypothesis that you can bridge from the immaterial, purely immaterial, or excuse me, purely material to the immaterial world. Like if we are just at bags of flesh, bouncing around in this world. How I guess I'm kind of going back to the problem of consciousness, but how do we justify the immaterial, like laws of logic, coming from, or the, how see what I'm saying? Kind of rambling here, but
Well, I would say it would be I would say it would be grounded in reason, right? So, I mean, if what we do or don't do is supposed to be dictated to us by God, then does He have reasons for telling us why we should do anything? If the answer is yes, then we can just appeal to reason, right? Because that's where it comes from. If the answer is no, then I don't see why we should respect what that cosmic being says, except that you don't want to suffer an eternity in hell. But I don't see where the justice is in that. There's no reason to do it except to avoid eternal punishment. That's purely selfish.
no, I mean, I agree with some of what you're saying, but what I'm trying to say is like if we look at the nature of the immaterial laws of logic and reason, how do we even justify their origin or existence? And if I was just to look inductively at them and just in terms of observational, like if I was to take a reason and put it into a science experiment, if you will, there's characteristics that apply to laws of logic. For instance, like I would believe, and tell me if you agree with this. Laws of logic are universal. They're timeless, like they don't expire. They're unchanging. They don't ever change, and they're bound to a mind, meaning they're concepts of the mind. And if I'm just looking at those four characteristics, timeless, universal, unchanging, and irrevocable to the mind, it seems to me to make the most sense that you would find those four characteristics in the origin and the source of reason and logic, which to me is best explained by a governing principle, which would be God. Um, in comparison to the atheistic or the materialistic worldview that just uh, I haven't heard a very coherent justification for laws of logic. Does that make
Um,
sense?
so I would agree with pretty much everything you said except for the very last thing, which sort of stated that it's dependent upon the mind. But I don't think that's true. The conscious agent can only be made aware of something like the law of non-contradiction by living and existing and experiencing a reality around them. I think it's all grounded in reality. The fact that I am not you, well, let's pick something that isn't like alive or whatever. The fact that oxygen atoms are not carbon atoms is grounded just in the brute fact that that's simply the case in the universe. Now, we look at that and we describe the universe in these terms, and we call these things the laws of logic, and they describe things that are true, but that doesn't mean that the laws of logic make, because to me this makes it sound like somebody is saying that the laws of logic make the universe exist as we know it, and to me that just doesn't really make any
I don't
sense.
think I would say that. I'm just more arguing that there's a subtle distinction, and Simon and I were talking about this last night, or we had a hard time, similar to me and you, reconciling this difference. Is that there's a difference between like the process or the external manifestation of laws of logic, like an apple's not an orange, and the laws of logic itself, meaning a purely immaterial concept of the laws of logic, which that's what I'm saying is bound to a mind. Like we don't have laws of logic apart from a mind. Like they're not, what I mean by that is they're not floating around in space and then suddenly we pick up on the right frequency and we are now able to
Yeah.
use laws of logic, or we don't go to Home Depot and buy laws of logic. They're in the
By
mind.
logic.
You
Buy it
know,
in
they're
bulk.
they're
Some
they're
people
in
need to
our.
buy it in bulk.
Yeah, I wish I could buy more of it, but I
Yeah.
can't. But
Um
you see what I'm saying? It's bound to the mind, and that's
yeah,
probably my
so
biggest
the
argument.
way we describe it is, but the laws of logic itself, and I feel like we actually pretty much agree on this, are grounded in immutable facts about the universe. Like something can't be, if something is, what is it? If P then not Q, P therefore not Q. Like oxygen
Yeah,
atoms are not carbon atoms, for example. That's that's true. And so what we did was we invented language, and then we use logic because we pretty much can't help it to describe things around us. We came up with these descriptions of reality, and the laws of logic are like part of that. But to me, that only the grounding for the laws of logic is reality itself. So to me, that's what it's grounded in. It doesn't have to be, because I don't really know what people mean by it has to be grounded in a mind that created the universe. Because to me, that's like saying minds create the universe. But if all life in the universe, if there was no life, the universe would still exist. In fact, it almost certainly existed for a very long time without any life in it.
yeah, and I think the thing that I was bringing up to Simon last night was like the thing I have trouble reconciling in a purely materialistic worldview is like if you're looking at evolution, and from what you're kind of saying, that laws of logic are maybe not bound to the mind in some sense. A long time ago, we were pseudo, excuse me, fish floating around in the sea, unable to reason and apply laws of logic. And then
Well, I
at
think
what,
animals are actually pretty reasonable and logic. They
yeah, well,
probably
whatever
don't
step you
have
want to take.
metacognition, but they do logical things, I would say.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not going to argue that fish or things do logical things, but I'm not sure that they
Sure.
would be aware of applying laws of logic in the way we know. I mean, who
I
knows? We
agree.
don't know the mind of a fish, but I would say it's probably not the case. But I guess I'm just saying that at some point we are evolved and adapted to being able to be aware of laws of logic and then use reason. I just don't see like by what mechanism did we evolve to use reason or to discover reason itself? That's like a very tricky question.
Well, so what I would say is I'm reading this really good book about language. So I don't want to say this. The author made a pretty good point. So why do we have such big brains? Is this like really weird, kind of complicated question? Well, we didn't evolve big brains in order so we could speak or in order so that we could necessarily do logic or math or anything like that, because that all came way later. We have these big brains because it wired us to be for social for being social creatures, right? Because in order to understand the complex interactions between individuals that are part of your group,
Hmm.
that requires a huge amount of brain matter. Now, there is some internal logic built within that, right? Animal instincts, you can say, are logical. I mean, there's nothing illogical about them,
So
right?
would you
Again, they
say
don't have
monkeys are
medic.
like monkeys or dolphins, or I mean, is
Yeah,
there
they
any other?
solve puzzles and they do all kinds of complex things.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't really. I'm honestly, I don't know the answer to this from like a biologist, but would they say that dolphins are aware of themselves using laws of logic, or they're just kind of
No,
reacting to pattern
no,
recognition?
no. But what I was gonna say is the fact that we can do the fact that we can think about our cognition, metacognition, and think about other people that are having thoughts, which we call complex theory of mind. I'm pretty sure, and math and language. Those all came out of us having these really massive brains and just being able to think more complexly and hold many, many ideas. So I think that the sort of I kind of forgot your original question,
Like, did okay? Here's my simple
but
question: did we develop into the ability to have to reason?
so I
Like, by what
yes,
mechanism
I
did we
I think
discover
we
reason?
evolved the ability to reason, and then we evolved, and then we not really evolved, but we just culturally invented what's the word I'm looking for? Mechanisms for conventions where we can describe what we're doing. I think that's it. Because if you
But
took a
you're not
bunch of
saying that we created the laws of logic, right?
no, I think that the logical operation is something innate within us, and we're extraordinarily good at it. But we, invented ways to describe it. So, like for example, if we just took this would be the worst scientific, the most unethical, I should say, scientific experiment ever. But it would be fascinating. We just took a bunch of an enormous group of people that somehow couldn't talk, like they didn't have a language at all, and we just put them on an island and made sure that they like survived, but never spoke to them, never told them about the outside world or anything. They would still operate very logically. They would be social. It'd be basically like we're wild animals that can't talk again. You know,
Yeah.
I think that they would still do extraordinary things and they would be remarkably adaptive and they would probably manipulate their environment and do all these kinds of things. But they wouldn't necessarily, well, this would be fascinating. Maybe they would be able to have metacognition, but they'd have no way of telling us that they can because they don't have a language like we do, and it would maybe be well, it probably would be impossible because
Yeah.
after you go through puberty, if you've never spoken, you can't learn grammar. It's impossible. It's happened
Really?
several times. Yeah, there have been people that have been like kidnapped in basements
That's
until they were.
terrible.
There was a really famous girl in California who, in the '90s, this happened to her, and she escaped when she was like 16. She could say words, but she couldn't use grammar. She could only accidentally say like 3-word sentences and
Oh,
kind of tell you what she wanted to know. So
that's terrible. Well, yeah, I
so
recognize
t-
that.
to me, to me, what this tells us is that these logic rules, or sorry, the
Reason.
logic within us is basically programmed, and it's just part of our innate biology. And what we have are complex ways of describing it. And we've gotten to the point where we've run ourselves into walls where we're like, well, but we don't know why our programming, where it came from exactly or whatever.
Yeah, that's
So
what I just think needs more explanation on, like on biologist or excuse me, evolution. A scientist that I think would like. I mean, I don't believe in it, but I mean, I just think that that's the question I'm more interested in having, or the conversation I'm interested in having, because for a lot of people, they just think that reason is just floating out there and somewhere in this ether or in outer space, and then we evolved into understanding reason, and it's almost like we used. Did we have a one quarter ability to understand reason, and then we had a half ability to understand reason, and then we had reason to then discover reason? It just seems like a circular logic. That's like me saying the Bible is true because the Bible says it's true. I mean, you just like laugh at me, but I just think that's. that's a very difficult conversation to have. Like just again, the problem of consciousness that is very intriguing to me.
Yeah. So again, the point of my I gotta go here, but
All
the
right,
point of
I'll let you
my
go.
like hypothetical was to show that completely removed from any aspect of like culture or any ability to like describe what they're doing, we would still expect to find very rational, logical actors within us, even though they can't really describe it or anything like that. And I think other animals do it too. Like they solve puzzles and do all kinds of crazy things. But, anyways, come back
Thanks for
sometime and
having
we
me
can
on,
talk
man. I'll
more.
let you
But
go.
yeah,
Maybe we
sounds good.
talk again sometime.